Some people believe that the worst things in life come with a warning. A loud noise, a dark cloud, a strange dream. But sometimes, the worst things arrive quietly. They smile. They say thank you. They wait for you to trust them. Then they change everything. There was once a large family that lived in a beautiful old estate at the end of a quiet road. The house had been in the family for many years. It stood behind tall iron gates, surrounded by gardens that were always full of flowers. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. People who passed by often slowed down just to admire it. Some even said they wished they could live there. They had no idea what that house would one day become. The family living there was known for one thing more than anything else: kindness. If a neighbor needed help, they were the first to arrive. If someone had nowhere to stay, they always found an extra room. If a child needed school supplies, someone from the family quietly paid for them without expecting anything in return. They believed that kindness always found its way back to the people who gave it. For many years, that belief never failed them. The head of the family was a man named William. He was successful in business, but he never allowed money to change the way he treated people. He greeted everyone with respect, whether they worked in his office or swept the streets outside it. His wife, Eleanor, had a warm heart that seemed to make everyone feel comfortable. Even strangers found themselves opening up to her after only a few minutes of conversation. Together, they had built a peaceful home. Living with them were their 3 children. Daniel was the oldest. He liked solving problems and always looked for a logical answer before believing anything unusual. Grace was cheerful and caring. She loved reading stories and believed every person deserved a second chance. The youngest was Ethan. He could make almost anyone laugh. Even on difficult days, he somehow found a reason to smile. Also living in the house was William's father. Everyone simply called him Grandpa Arthur. His hair had turned completely white years ago, and he walked with the help of a wooden cane that never left his side. Although age had slowed his body, his mind remained as sharp as ever. Grandpa Arthur noticed little things that everyone else ignored. He noticed when a bird suddenly stopped singing. He noticed when someone smiled even though they were hurting inside. He noticed when the wind changed direction before rain arrived. It's the small things, he often told his grandchildren. The small things usually tell the biggest stories. Every evening, after dinner, he sat on the front porch with a cup of hot tea. He watched the sun disappear beyond the trees, while the rest of the family talked and laughed inside the house. It had become his favorite part of the day. Life followed the same peaceful routine. Every morning began with breakfast around the large dining table. Everyone tried their best to eat together before leaving for work or school. The house was always busy. The kitchen was filled with the smell of fresh bread. The gardens were carefully looked after. The staff greeted each other like old friends because many of them had worked there for years. It wasn't a perfect family. They argued sometimes. They disagreed. They made mistakes. But they always found their way back to one another. That was what made the house feel like home. One rainy afternoon, everything began to change. The rain had been falling since morning. Thick gray clouds covered the sky, and the sound of water tapping against the windows filled the house. Eleanor was arranging flowers in the dining room when her phone started ringing. She smiled when she saw the caller's name. It was an old friend she hadn't spoken to in months. "Hello," Eleanor answered happily. For a few moments, she listened quietly. The smile slowly disappeared from her face. She stopped arranging the flowers. Her eyes filled with sadness. I had no idea," she whispered. William looked up from the papers he was reading. He immediately knew something was wrong. When the call ended, Eleanor remained standing in silence. William walked over to her. "What happened?" She took a slow breath before answering. "There was an accident." William frowned. "What kind of accident?" "A car accident." She looked down at the floor. A young couple didn't survive. The room suddenly felt much quieter. William gently held her hand. "Did you know them?" "No," she shook her head. "But my friend did." She paused again. "They have a daughter." William waited. She lost both her parents on the same day. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Rain continued falling outside. Finally, William asked, "Does she have family?" Eleanor slowly shook her head. "None that are willing to take her." That evening, the family gathered for dinner, as they always did. Everyone noticed Eleanor seemed unusually quiet. Even Ethan stopped joking. William looked around the table. "Your mother received some sad news today." He explained everything. The accident, the little girl, the fact that she now had nowhere to go. Silence filled the room. Grace was the first to speak. "How old is she?" "Around 11. Grace lowered her fork. "That's so young." Daniel sighed. "I can't imagine losing both parents." Neither could anyone else. Grandpa Arthur remained quiet. He slowly stirred his tea while listening to everyone. Eleanor looked at William before speaking. "My friend asked if we could help." William nodded. "I've been thinking about it all afternoon." Grace leaned forward. "What did you decide?" William looked around the table. "I don't think any child should have to face something like this alone." Grace smiled immediately. "I agree." "So do I," Ethan added. Daniel nodded. "If she wants to stay here, I don't see why not." Eleanor looked relieved. She had hoped the family would feel the same way. Then she turned toward Grandpa Arthur. "What do you think?" Everyone looked at him. The old man remained silent for a few seconds. Finally, he smiled gently. "I've never believed kindness is a mistake." The family relaxed. Then Grandpa Arthur quietly added, "But every person carries a story." Nobody said anything. He continued looking into his cup. "And sometimes," he paused, "we don't learn that story until it's too late." The room became strangely quiet. Ethan chuckled softly. Grandpa always finds a mysterious way to say things. Everyone laughed. Even Grandpa Arthur smiled. The serious moment quickly passed. Nobody gave his words another thought. 2 days later, the rain stopped. The morning sky was bright and clear. A small taxi slowly drove through the front gates before stopping in front of the house. The driver stepped out first. Then, the back door opened. A little girl carefully climbed out. She held a small suitcase with both hands. It looked old. The corners were worn. One side had been stitched together where the fabric had torn. She stood beside the taxi without moving. For a moment, she simply looked at the enormous house in front of her. It was probably the biggest home she had ever seen. Eleanor walked down the front steps with a warm smile. "You must be Lily." The little girl nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice was quiet, almost shy. Eleanor walked closer. "You don't have to be nervous." Lily looked down at her shoes. "I'm sorry." "What are you sorry for?" "I don't know." Eleanor's heart broke a little. She gently placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "You're safe here." Lily looked up. For the first time, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small one, but it was enough to make everyone standing nearby smile too. Grace stepped forward. "I'm Grace." Ethan waved. "I'm Ethan." Daniel smiled politely. "It's nice to meet you." Lily greeted each of them quietly. When she reached Grandpa Arthur, she stopped. She lowered her head respectfully. "It's nice to meet you too, sir." Grandpa Arthur smiled kindly. "And it's nice to meet you." For a brief second, neither of them looked away. Then Lily smiled again. The moment passed. No one noticed anything unusual. Grace happily picked up Lily's suitcase. "Come on, I'll show you your room." As they walked through the house, Lily looked around with wide eyes. Every room seemed to surprise her. The large staircase, the tall windows, the family photographs hanging on the walls. She stopped in front of one picture. It showed the entire family standing together in the garden. "They look happy," she said softly. Grace smiled. "We are." Then she quickly corrected herself. "I mean, we try to be." Lily nodded. "I like that." Grace opened the bedroom door. "This is yours." Lily stepped inside slowly. The room wasn't huge, but it was bright and comfortable. Fresh blankets covered the bed. A small bookshelf stood beside the window. There was even a desk with a reading lamp. Lily didn't speak. She simply looked around the room. Then she placed her little suitcase on the floor. Very gently, she touched the edge of the bed, almost as if she couldn't believe it was real. She stopped talking. Grace waited. I've never had my own room before. Grace smiled warmly. Well? She looked around the room. You do now. Lily turned away quickly. She blinked several times. Then she smiled once more. Thank you. At that moment, nobody in that house could have imagined that opening the front door to one lonely little girl was the first step toward a nightmare that would change every one of their lives forever. The next few weeks passed so peacefully that the family slowly stopped thinking about the terrible tragedy that had brought Lily into their lives. The sadness in her eyes began to fade. Little by little, she smiled more often. She laughed more. She even started talking more during dinner. It felt as though the house itself had become brighter. Every morning, Lily was always the first person awake. Long before the rest of the family came downstairs, she would quietly help in the kitchen. Sometimes she washed the fruits. Other times, she set the dining table. She never waited for someone to ask her. She simply looked for ways to help. One morning, Eleanor walked into the kitchen just after sunrise. She expected to find the cook preparing breakfast. Instead, she found Lily standing on a small wooden stool, carefully arranging plates on the dining table. The little girl turned around and smiled. Good morning. Eleanor couldn't help smiling back. You've been awake for a while, haven't you? Lily nodded. I didn't want everyone to wake up hungry. Eleanor walked over and looked around. The table looked beautiful. Everything had been arranged neatly. Even the flowers in the small vase had been replaced with fresh ones from the garden. You did all this? Lily nodded again. I hope I didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor gently shook her head. No. She smiled warmly. You did everything right. Lily's face lit up. It wasn't because she had been praised. It was because she looked genuinely happy to make someone else's day easier. From that morning on, helping became part of her routine. She folded clean clothes. She dusted shelves. She helped prepare dinner. She even reminded Ethan whenever he forgot where he had left his keys. You left them beside the front door yesterday. Ethan laughed. I don't know how you remember everything. Lily shrugged. I just pay attention. Soon, everyone began saying the same thing. She's such a wonderful child. I don't know what we ever did without her. She's a blessing. Even the staff adored her. The gardener taught her the names of every flower growing around the estate. The cook showed her how to bake fresh bread. The housekeeper let her help organize the library. Nobody ever had to tell Lily what to do. She always seemed to know. One afternoon, Grace decided to teach Lily how to use her camera. They spent nearly an hour walking through the gardens together. Grace showed her how to hold the camera, how to focus, how to wait for the perfect moment. Photography isn't about taking pictures, Grace explained. It's about noticing things other people miss. Lily looked through the camera and smiled. I think Grandpa would like that. Grace laughed. He probably would. They found Arthur sitting on his favorite bench beneath an old tree. Grace lifted the camera. Smile, Grandpa. Arthur looked up. You always take pictures when I'm least prepared. That's when they look the most natural. Click. The picture was taken. Grace looked at the screen. It's perfect. Lily leaned over to see it. Grandpa Arthur smiled softly. So, what do you think? Lily looked at the picture for several seconds. I think, she hesitated. You look lonely. Arthur looked surprised. Lonely? She nodded. Your smile is happy, but your eyes aren't. For a moment, nobody spoke. Grace slowly lowered the camera. Arthur looked at Lily carefully. She wasn't trying to be rude. She sounded completely honest. Finally, Arthur smiled. You notice a lot for someone your age. Lily smiled back. My mother used to tell me that. Arthur nodded quietly. The conversation moved on, but later that evening, he found himself thinking about her words. His smile was happy, but were his eyes? A few days later, something else happened. Grace was cleaning one of the upstairs rooms while Lily dusted the bookshelves. As Grace reached for a heavy box sitting on top of a cabinet, it slipped from her hands. Oh! The box fell. Without thinking, Lily stretched out one hand. She caught it before it reached the floor. Grace stared. So fast. Lily blinked. What? You caught it. Lily looked confused. I did? Grace laughed. I've never seen anyone move that quickly. Lily looked down at the box in her hands. My father always said I had quick hands. Grace smiled. He wasn't wrong. When they came downstairs, Grace couldn't stop talking about it. You should have seen her. That box would have smashed into pieces, but she caught it like it weighed nothing. Everyone laughed. Ethan looked impressed. Maybe we should put you on the family baseball team. Lily giggled. Grandpa Arthur smiled with everyone else, but something quietly stayed in his mind. He had been standing at the bottom of the staircase. He remembered where Lily had been. She had looked farther away, much farther away. Maybe he had simply remembered it wrong. Age could do that. He decided not to think about it anymore. The following morning, Arthur walked slowly through the gardens with his cane. The air smelled fresh after a night of light rain. Near the flower beds, he found the old gardener kneeling beside a row of roses. Morning, Arthur said. The gardener smiled. Morning. Arthur looked around. The flowers look healthier. They do. The gardener chuckled. I think they found a new friend. Arthur looked puzzled. What do you mean? The gardener pointed toward the far end of the garden. Lily was watering flowers with a small watering can. Several birds surrounded her. Not flying, not frightened, simply standing near her feet. Arthur watched quietly. That's unusual. The gardener nodded. I've worked here almost 20 years. Those birds usually fly away when anyone gets close. But lately, they keep following her. Arthur continued watching. Lily wasn't feeding them. She wasn't calling them. Yet the birds stayed close, almost as if they didn't want to leave. Just then, Lily noticed them watching. She smiled and waved. The birds flew away together. Arthur said nothing. That evening, everyone gathered in the living room after dinner. Rain tapped gently against the windows, while Ethan challenged Daniel to a board game. Grace curled up on the sofa with a book. William and Eleanor talked quietly near the fireplace. Lily sat on the rug, putting together a puzzle. Every now and then she laughed whenever Ethan pretended to lose on purpose. The room felt warm, comfortable, peaceful. Arthur looked around. Everyone seemed happy. He smiled to himself. Maybe he had been worrying for nothing. Maybe Lily really was exactly who she appeared to be, a sweet little girl trying to rebuild her life after losing everything. He almost felt guilty for doubting her. Later that night, Arthur went to bed earlier than usual. Outside, the rain stopped. The wind became strangely still. The house fell silent. Hours passed. No sounds, no footsteps, no voices. Then, Arthur opened his eyes. He didn't know what had woken him. The room was completely dark. He reached for the small clock on his bedside table. 3 o'clock. He sighed quietly. Perhaps he simply needed a drink of water. As he sat up, he noticed something. Moonlight was shining through the curtains. He slowly walked toward the window. His old joints ached with every step. He pulled the curtain aside. His eyes settled on the garden below. At first, everything looked normal. The trees stood quietly beneath the moonlight. The flowers barely moved. Then, he saw someone standing in the middle of the garden. It was Lily. She was wearing the same white nightdress she had gone to bed in. She wasn't walking. She wasn't looking around. She simply stood there, perfectly still. Arthur frowned. What is she doing outside? He waited. Surely she would turn around or go back inside. But she didn't move, not even a little. The wind brushed through the trees. Leaves swayed gently. Her hair didn't. Arthur's grip tightened around the curtain. A full minute passed. Then another. Still, she never moved. His heart began beating a little faster. "Lily," he whispered. Of course she couldn't hear him. Then, very slowly, she lifted her head. She looked directly toward his bedroom window. Their eyes met, even from that distance. Arthur felt as though she was looking straight through him. Then, a slow smile appeared on her face. Arthur froze. A chill ran through his entire body. He blinked, just once. When he opened his eyes again, the garden was empty. Lily was gone. There was nobody there. Not a single person. Arthur stared into the darkness for several long seconds. His breathing became uneven. He searched every corner of the garden. Nothing. Had she walked away? No. There hadn't been enough time. He would have seen her. Arthur slowly stepped back from the window. For the first time since Lily arrived at the estate, he felt something he couldn't explain. Not fear. Not yet. Just one quiet question. What exactly had he just seen?